A battlefield secret resurfaced decades later, when a young doctor showed him something unforgettable. The afternoon sun cast a pale, tired glow over the ruins of the village. Once filled with life, laughter, and the rhythm of ordinary days, now it lay silent, broken, and shrouded in smoke. Dust floated in the air like a gray veil, settling slowly on the shattered roofs and collapsed walls. The ground was scarred with the evidence of war-burned wood, scattered belongings, and the quiet bodies of those who could not escape. The silence after battle was always the loudest, pressing down on the soul like an unbearable weight. Among the wreckage moved a lone soldier. His uniform was torn, his boots coated in dust, and his steps heavy from exhaustion. His skin glistened with sweat under the fading sun, and though his body screamed for rest, his eyes remained sharp, scanning every shadow. He carried not only the burden of survival, but the invisible weight of memories, faces of brothers lost, orders obeyed, and the endless moral questions that haunted him. This soldier was different from the others. He was a black man in a war, where prejudice followed him as surely as the enemy's bullets. Yet here, on this battlefield, survival was the only equalizer. Still, inside him, humanity remained alive. Fighting against the numbness war tried to carve into every man's heart. Then, through the suffocating quiet, a sound broke the stillness, a soft, fragile cry. The soldier froze. It was not the cry of a wounded man, nor the moan of a dying comrade. It was higher, lighter. A child's voice. His heart thudded. Slowly, cautiously, he followed the sound, weaving through splintered beams and crumbled stone. Each step brought the faint sobs closer until, finally, he saw it. A small boy, no more than 5, half buried beneath broken wood. His tiny body trembled, his face streaked with dirt and tears. He looked like a ghost of innocence trapped in a nightmare. The soldier's breath caught. The boy's clothes told the truth immediately. He belonged to the other side. The enemy. His people, his flag, his nation, everything the soldier had been told to fight against. Instinct screamed at him to walk away, to leave the child where fate had placed him. War did not have room for mercy, but as the boy's wide, terrified eyes met his, something cracked inside the soldier's chest. He saw not an enemy, not a threat, just a child fragile, helpless, clinging to life in a world determined to destroy. His orders, his training, his loyalty all collided with the simple truth staring back at him. He hesitated, torn between duty and compassion. His hands shook. The cries grew softer, weaker, fading into exhaustion. Finally, the soldier dropped to his knees, pushing aside the heavy wood with all the strength left in him. Gently, as if handling something sacred, he lifted the boy into his arms. The child whimpered but clung to him, burying his face in the soldier's chest. The man pulled him close, shielding him from view. He knew if his comrades saw this, questions would be raised, punishment could follow. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The battlefield demanded destruction. Yet here he was, choosing life. The boy lay trembling in his arms, his small frame so light that the soldier feared he might vanish if he loosened his grip. The battlefield around them had quieted, but in his chest, chaos raged. He carried the child deeper into the ruins, away from the eyes of his unit. Only when he was certain no one was watching did he stop in the shadow of a crumbled wall. There, hidden from the world, he lowered the boy gently onto a blanket of dust and ash. The child's lips were cracked, his voice hoarse from crying. The soldier reached for his canteen, unscrewing it with hands that still trembled from battle. Tilting it carefully, he let the water touch the boy's lips. At first the child flinched, suspicious, but then thirst overcame fear. He drank greedily, drops of water running down his chin, soaking into the dirt on his face. "Slowly, little one," the soldier whispered, his voice rough yet tender. He broke off a piece of dry ration bread, softening it with water before pressing it gently into the boy's hands. The child nibbled with cautious hunger, his eyes never leaving the soldier's face. It was as if he were studying him, searching for something familiar, something trustworthy, in the midst of this strange and frightening world. Hours passed like this. The soldier kept watch, glancing toward the horizon where smoke still rose. His weapon within reach, yet his attention fixed on the boy. In those moments, he was no longer just a soldier. He was protector, guardian, even father. War had stolen so much from him, his comrades, his innocence, his peace. But now, for reasons he could not explain, it demanded he save instead of destroy. When night fell, the ruins grew cold, and the silence heavier. The boy curled against him, shivering. The soldier wrapped his own jacket around the child, pulling him close. In the darkness, he leaned down and whispered words not meant for enemies, nor even for comrades, but for this fragile soul who had stumbled into his hands. "You're safe now," he murmured softly. "Don't be afraid." The boy's small hand clutched the fabric of his uniform, as though holding onto those words with all his might. His trembling eased, his breathing steadied, and at last he drifted into sleep. The soldier sat awake long into the night, staring into the shadows, knowing this peace could not last. The next morning, the order came. He was being sent to another post, far from this village. The weight in his chest grew unbearable. He could not take the child with him, not without endangering them both. Yet he could not abandon him either. After searching quietly, he found a local woman who had been taking in orphans. Her face was lined with hardship, but her eyes carried kindness. Kneeling before the boy, the soldier pressed something into his small hands, a dog tag he had worn close to his heart. "This will protect you," he said, his voice breaking with the effort to remain steady. "Keep it always. It means you are not forgotten." The boy shook his head, clinging desperately to the soldier's hand, eyes filling with tears. His grip was fierce, refusing to let go. For a moment, the man almost broke every order he'd ever been given. But war does not wait for tenderness. With a final trembling breath, he forced himself to rise. The boy's cries followed him as he walked away, each step heavier than the last. He did not look back. He could not. In his heart, he believed this chapter was closed forever. The war had long faded into history, its echoes buried beneath layers of time. Cities rebuilt, villages healed, and new generations grew without knowing the stench of smoke or the weight of gunfire. Yet for the soldier, the past was never truly gone. It lingered in his bones, in the ache of old wounds, and in the memories that surfaced uninvited during quiet nights. Now older, with hair flecked gray and hands calloused from labor, he lived a life of quiet modesty. Gone were the uniforms and the heavy boots. Now he wore overalls smudged with grease. He spent his days in a small workshop at the edge of the city, fixing engines, mending broken machines, and finding solace in the rhythm of his tools. It was honest work, simple, steady, and it kept his restless spirit tethered to the present. The world around him bustled with life. Outside his shop, the streets hummed with laughter, merchants calling out their prices, children chasing one another in the sun. He often paused to watch them, smiling faintly, though a part of him always wondered what had become of the boy he once saved. Did the child survive? Did he grow into a man, or had the cruel hand of fate stolen him away? The soldier would never know, or so he believed. On one bright afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of his workshop, he felt a sudden sharpness in his chest. The wrench slipped from his hand, clattering onto the floor. He staggered, gripping the edge of the workbench, but his legs buckled beneath him. The world blurred. He collapsed. The noise startled passers-by outside, and within moments, footsteps hurried toward him. Through the haze of dizziness and pain, he heard a voice, calm, firm, yet laced with urgency. A young man knelt beside him, checking his pulse, steadying his breathing. "Stay with me," the voice said. soft but commanding. Strong hands lifted his shoulders, adjusting his position with surprising gentleness. The soldier blinked, trying to focus. Through the fog, a face appeared clean-shaven, eyes bright with concern, movements precise and practiced. The young man wore a white coat, though its sleeves were rolled up from rushing into action. He was a doctor, clearly, but something about him felt different. He didn't treat the old soldier like just another patient. There was an unusual care in the way he spoke, a kind of reverence in his tone. The soldier's breath came ragged, but his gaze lingered on the doctor. There was something oddly familiar about him, not in the way he looked, but in the presence he carried. It stirred something deep, something buried under decades of silence. The doctor pressed a cool hand against his forehead, speaking calmly. "You'll be all right. Just breathe. I've got you." The soldier's chest still burned, but the words were like an anchor pulling him back. In the doctor's eyes he saw kindness, an echo of something he thought long forgotten. For a fleeting second, he wondered if fate itself had intervened, placing this stranger before him. Yet the soldier could not name it. Not yet. The memory hovered at the edge of recognition, just out of reach, like a shadow behind a curtain. He closed his eyes, letting the doctor's voice steady him, unaware that the past he thought had been sealed forever was about to rise once more. The old soldier lay in the hospital bed, his body weary but slowly regaining strength. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the room, yet the warmth of the late afternoon sun streaming through the blinds softened the atmosphere. He thought his time here would pass like any other treatment, impersonal, distant, forgettable. But the young doctor had proven otherwise. Unlike many physicians who treated their patients with brisk efficiency, this doctor lingered. After finishing his rounds, he returned in the evenings, slipping quietly into the room with a notebook in one hand and a gentle smile on his face. He asked questions that went beyond symptoms and blood pressure. Did the soldier sleep well? Was the food tolerable? Did the loneliness of the nights weigh heavily on him? And when the soldier hesitated to answer, the doctor did not press. Instead, he would sit in the chair beside the bed, speaking softly, as though conversation itself might heal more than medicine ever could. One evening, the soldier asked the question that had been pressing on his mind. "Why do you keep coming back?" His voice was low, roughened with age, yet tinged with genuine curiosity. The doctor paused, then gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "Because I know what it means to feel abandoned. And I promised myself I would never let anyone under my care feel that way." There was a silence that followed, heavy yet not uncomfortable. The doctor leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant, as if searching for the right place in his memories to begin. "I grew up in an orphanage," he said finally, "near a village that had been destroyed during the war. I don't remember much of those early years, just hunger, fear, and fire. But there is one memory that never left me." The soldier's heart gave a sudden jolt, but he kept his face still. The doctor's voice softened, almost reverent. "I remember being trapped alone when the world around me was nothing but smoke and rubble. And then he appeared. A soldier. I never knew his name. I was told he was from the other side, the enemy. But to me, he was the only reason I survived." The words pierced through the old man's chest like arrows. His pulse quickened, and he gripped the edge of his blanket to keep his hands from trembling. "He gave me water," the doctor continued, his eyes shining with the kind of memory that had been carried like a treasure. "He fed me when I was too weak to stand. He whispered that I was safe, that I didn't have to be afraid anymore." I never forgot his face. Never. The soldier's breath caught. His mind raced back to the boy, the dirt-streaked cheeks, the trembling body, the desperate clutch of tiny hands refusing to let go. The doctor looked down, almost ashamed of the emotion in his own words. "I've spent my whole life wondering why he saved me. Why he risked himself for a child who wasn't even his own. That moment shaped me. It's the reason I became a doctor. Because one man's compassion taught me that saving a life, any life, matters. The old soldier swallowed hard. His heart thundered in his chest, aching to speak, aching to confess. Yet the words lodged in his throat. He could not reveal himself. Not yet. So he sat in silence, his face calm, though inside him the storm raged. For the first time in decades, the past stood at his bedside, breathing through the lips of another man. The hospital had grown quiet, the hum of footsteps in the hallway fading as the evening shift took over. In the old soldier's room, the light of dusk poured through the blinds, painting the walls in muted shades of gold and orange. He sat propped against the pillows, his body weaker than it had once been, but his spirit restless, haunted by the words the doctor had shared nights before. He had listened in silence, his heart pounding like a drum, but he had said nothing. For days he kept the secret locked inside, afraid to break the fragile calm of their conversations. Yet the past weighed heavier each time the young man spoke. It was as if fate itself was circling closer, demanding the truth be set free. That evening, the doctor returned as he always did, but something in his demeanor was different. He seemed quieter, more contemplative, his gaze filled with unspoken thoughts. He carried no medical charts, no instruments, only a small leather pouch he held with care. "May I sit?" he asked softly. The soldier nodded. For a long moment, the doctor said nothing. Then, with deliberate slowness, he opened the pouch and drew out a simple necklace. Its chain was worn, the metal dull with age, but at its center hung a small tag, scratched and scarred, carrying the weight of history. The old soldier's breath caught in his throat. He knew it instantly. He had given it away decades ago, pressed into the small hands of a frightened boy as a silent promise that he was not forgotten. The doctor's voice trembled as he spoke, his thumb brushing over the tag. "This was given to me by a soldier. The only reason I'm alive today is because of him." His eyes lifted, glassy with memory. "I never knew his name, but I carried this every day of my life. It reminded me of mercy, of hope, of the man who saw me as more than an enemy." The room seemed to shrink around them. The soldier's heart thundered so loudly he thought the younger man must hear it. His hands began to shake as he reached out, fingers hovering just above the necklace. "Know this," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I know it because I gave it to you." The doctor blinked, uncomprehending at first. Then the words sank in. His breath hitched, his lips parting as though the air had been ripped from his lungs. "You." Tears welled in the soldier's eyes. He swallowed hard, every word tasting of memories and regret. "That soldier you remember, that was me. I found you. I fed you. I told you that you were safe." His chest rose and fell unevenly, his voice trembling under the weight of confession. "I never thought I'd see you again." For a heartbeat, the room was silent, only the muffled sounds of the hospital in the distance. Then the doctor's face crumpled, overwhelmed by the impossible truth. His hands shook as he clutched the necklace to his chest, and tears spilled freely down his cheeks. "You saved me," he whispered, his voice breaking with gratitude and disbelief. "All this time, it was you." The old soldier nodded, his own tears falling, his weathered hands reaching out. The doctor leaned forward, and in that instant, decades of silence and mystery shattered. They embraced tightly, no longer the nameless soldier and the orphaned boy, but two lives bound together by an act of compassion that had defied war itself. The embrace lingered, heavy with decades of unspoken truth, as if time itself had been waiting for this moment to arrive. When at last they drew apart, the doctor's face was streaked with tears, his hands still trembling as they clutched the old necklace. He stared at the man before him, weathered, fragile, yet unmistakably the figure from his earliest memory. "I can't believe it," he whispered, his voice raw. "All my life, people told me soldiers were nothing but killers. They said men in uniform had no hearts, no mercy, especially those from the other side. I grew up hearing that over and over, like a curse carved into my skin. The old soldier's chest tightened. He had heard such words before on battlefields, in whispers, in the way strangers looked at him. He bowed his head as though bearing the weight of every accusation, every shadow of the war that clung to him. The doctor's eyes softened, his voice steadying as he continued. But then, there was you. One man who should have seen me as nothing more than an enemy child, chose to see me as human. You risked yourself to pull me from that rubble. You gave me water when you had none to spare. You whispered that I was safe when the whole world told me I wasn't. That moment shattered everything I'd been taught. His voice cracked, emotion rising like a tide. You didn't just save my life, you saved my faith in people. The soldier's lips trembled, his throat tight with words he couldn't form. He had carried guilt for years, guilt that he hadn't done enough, that he had walked away and never looked back. To hear now that his small act had not only endured, but transformed another life, it was more than he could bear. The doctor leaned forward, his tone filled with reverence. Because of you, I chose this path. I became a doctor because I wanted to save lives the way mine was saved. Every patient I treat, every person I comfort, it's because of what you did for me. Your act of mercy rippled through my life and became my purpose. The old man's eyes burned with tears. He had never thought of himself as a hero, just a soldier who had once followed his conscience in defiance of war's cruelty. Yet here was proof that even a single choice, made in silence and secrecy, could change the course of another human being's destiny. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence was not empty, but full of recognition, of gratitude, of the invisible thread that had bound their lives together across time and distance. Finally, the doctor's voice broke. The quiet, low but firm. I thought I had lost you forever. For years, I carried your face in my memory, not knowing if you lived or died, not knowing if you even remembered me. I never imagined fate would bring us together again. The soldier managed a faint smile, though his voice shook as he answered. I remembered you every day. I just never believed I would see you standing here, grown, alive, stronger than I ever dreamed. The doctor's shoulders shook with quiet sobs, but there was light in his eyes, a light born not of sorrow, but of awe. He had lived his life inspired by a nameless figure. And now that figure sat before him, real and tangible, the embodiment of a promise fulfilled. In that moment, both men understood what words could never fully capture. Their lives had been intertwined by fate from the very beginning. A soldier's choice to save a child had become a doctor's calling to save the world. And as the evening sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, they sat side by side, no longer strangers bound by mystery, but family forged by mercy. The sky outside the hospital window glowed in shades of orange and crimson, the kind of sunset that seemed to linger longer than usual, as though the heavens themselves were reluctant to let the day end. Inside the quiet room, the air was calm. Machines hummed softly, nurses' footsteps echoed faintly in the corridor, but within those walls, time had slowed to a sacred stillness. The old soldier sat propped in his chair by the window, his breathing steady now, though his body remained frail. Beside him, the young doctor had pulled a chair close, not as physician to patient, but as one soul to another. They didn't speak for a long while, for words were no longer necessary. Silence itself carried the weight of their shared story, and unspoken acknowledgement of the miracle that had brought them together again. The soldier's eyes drifted to the fading light, and he felt the warmth on his skin. How many sunsets had he seen since the war? How many nights had he gone to sleep with questions that had no answers? Yet here, as the day gave way to dusk, he finally understood. The past had not been lost. It had waited for this moment of reunion. This moment of peace. The doctor leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, the old necklace still dangling from his fingers. He glanced at the soldier with eyes full of reverence. "All my life, I thought I carried this alone," he murmured, his voice breaking softly. "But now I see, I was never truly alone. You were always there, even if only in memory." The soldier gave a weary smile, one touched with both sorrow and pride. "And I thought the world had forgotten that boy. But it seems I carried him too. Every time I closed my eyes at night, every time I wondered if mercy had been wasted in a place of hate, the first carried him." The room filled with a gentle quiet, one that felt less like emptiness and more like completion. They sat together, watching as the sun slipped lower, its rays stretching across the city, like golden threads weaving one day into the next. The young doctor placed his hand gently over the soldier's. The contrast between them was striking, youthful strength and weathered fragility, but in that touch they were equals. Two lives, two journeys, joined by one act of courage in the ruins of war. Outside, the city bustled, unaware of the miracle taking place within those four walls. But for the soldier and the doctor, the world had narrowed to this: gratitude, humanity, and the unshakable bond of compassion. The narrator's voice carries the closing truth, soft yet firm, resonant as though etched into the very fabric of time. A single act of compassion can outlive war, hatred, and time itself. What we give in secret may one day return to us, multiplied in ways we never imagined. As the last rays of sunlight slipped beneath the horizon, the two men remained there, no longer soldier and orphan, no longer divided by sides or scars of history. They were simply two human beings, bound forever by a choice made long ago, the choice to save a life. And in that quiet, golden hour, both finally understood: mercy is never lost. It only waits for its moment to return.